We're not consuming the artificial pornography. We're not consuming alcohol, substances, chemicals, whatever. We're tapping into the innate systems within ourselves that respond to the external environment. And I believe that's how we take back control, and that's how we can live a healthy, sustainable life and increase our enjoyment by naturally stimulating dopamine over a sustainable period of time. Addiction is such an insidious disease. When I think back on how I became addicted, it was a gradual progression from starting out with gateway substances leading up to end of the line substances. I mean, addiction brought me to death's door, and I don't even know how I'm surviving today, that I'm alive here before you speaking, that my mental faculties are intact, that I'm still standing. The stuff that I went through, that alcohol, drugs put me through, for all intents and purposes, I should have died. But thinking about the insidious nature of alcohol and drugs and the lies that they seep into us as we consume them. Alcohol led to pretty well every bad choice I've ever made in my life. Now, not every bad choice. I've made a couple bad choices sober. The saying, be sober-minded. Well, there's merit to that. Having a sober mind is being able to think clearly and without weighted judgment. What I mean by weighted judgment is that alcohol and drugs weigh judgment in a certain direction, usually towards risque behaviors or towards actions that further the consumption of drugs or the fulfillment of pleasure, instant gratification. It all leads to instant gratification. Drugs and alcohol, smoking cigarettes, sex, porn, it's all instant gratification. It's all stimulating dopamine for that instant buzz, that instant release. And dopamine is the neurochemical, the neurotransmitter of desire. It's more so the neurochemical of desire than it is of anything else. Now, of course, it brings pleasure because the pleasure reinforces the desire. And in general, dopamine is meant to reinforce behaviors and actions that are conducive to survival or the propagation of the species. So when we learn something new, when we interact with a novel environment or novel stimuli, it increases our likelihood of survival as we learn more about our environment, or we learn a new skill, or we learn a new piece of knowledge that can aid us in either finding a mate or securing our environment, securing our home, protecting our progeny, protecting our children, furthering the development of our community, passing along our genes, ensuring the survival of the species and ensuring the survival of ourselves. That's what dopamine is for. It's for reinforcement of behavior. But doing drugs and alcohol, instant gratification, and even pornography, that it hijacks that natural, innate reward system, the reinforcement system, our neurological systems, our nervous systems, our brains. The neurons can't tell the difference when it's receiving the dopamine. When the dopamine's being released, it's reinforcing behavior. So we hijack our brains to seek the artificial. And the artificial can be porn, it can be drugs, it can be alcohol. It's an external locus of dopamine release. We're stimulating dopamine from an external source. And when we take that external source away, when the alcohol is gone, when the drug's gone, we withdraw and we crave the dopamine release that has been displaced or has been distanced from the removal of the external stimulation, the external source of stimulation. And that leads to cravings, that leads to drug seeking, alcohol seeking, it leads to relapse, it leads to addiction. And that's why addictions form, because we're craving that external source of dopamine stimulation. Now, we have a way to stimulate dopamine naturally. And for me, learning and seeking novelty is probably the best way that I get dopamine today. So we can only replace a habit. I found ways to naturally stimulate dopamine so I'm not getting that craving to seek an external source of dopamine release or stimulation. And I receive that dopamine release by setting goals and achieving those goals. I write my goals out, and I do this weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. I do a multi-scale plan, and I check mark the goals that I accomplish, that I achieve. And it's kind of like playing a video game. It's like I'm ranking up, I'm getting experience, and I'm progressing, and I'm moving forward. And by knocking these things off the list, I'm generating a natural stimulation of dopamine by just doing things that are furthering my development in the world, that are positive, that are sustainable, also healthy, right? These are healthy ways of achieving or attaining a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment in life. So setting goals is the first way I achieve a natural release of dopamine. The second way is learning. I'm learning new things. I'm reading books, I'm studying subjects, and then I'm writing on those subjects. I'm reviewing those books, I'm summarizing the key points, and I'm writing on the subjects and the topics of interest that I find interesting and that I want to share with others. So writing them out and then sharing them with others, like how I'm doing here on YouTube and sharing with you, is another way that I stimulate dopamine. And that's because learning is beneficial to the survival of my organism. So I'm tapping into the natural reward system, the reinforcement system, which stimulates the release of dopamine to reinforce that behavior. The third method of dopamine that I get is by seeking out novelty. And novelty is simply finding new things. So I find new books to learn, new books to read, new subjects to study. I'm taking new courses. I'm doing new things, new hobbies, new habits. I have new friends. I'm in a new phase of life. I'm seeking new experiences. I'm involving myself in a new, novel environment, a novel mental environment, a novel emotional environment, a novel spiritual environment, a novel physical environment. I'm doing all these things to facilitate and foster novelty in my life because novelty is the new drug. Novelty is the spice of life. It really adds excitement. And by seeking novelty, I can stimulate the release of dopamine as I'm experiencing new things and experiencing new things. It's chasing novelty, right? I mean, that's a whole reason why pornography is such a potent addiction because of the novel experiences. I think it's called the Coolidge effect, where when a man views a varied amount of women in sequence or succession, he feels revitalized even if he's already jacked it off to a girl prior, right? Because we're meant to spread our genes out, spread our seed across a large population of women, as many women as possible. So when we see all these different videos of pornography, it stimulates the novelty effect in our brain because we're seeing novel mates, novel potential mates, and we get revitalized, and it stimulates more dopamine release, neurotransmitter release, and it revitalizes us to get back up on the horse, right? And we can replicate that in a natural format. The pornography is artificial, the drugs are artificial, the alcohol is artificial, but we can kind of tap into the same mechanism that the artificial stimulus or the artificial stimuli are tapping into. We can rewire our brains and we can take back control of our environments by employing novelty, by seeking novelty. Now, I don't mean seeking extravagant, excessive novelty like bungee jumping or thrill seeking. While that is a valid means of releasing dopamine by thrill seeking, I don't recommend that because it can get ourselves into dangerous, sticky situations. I'm talking more about sustainable novelty over a long period of time. So simply seeking out a variety of experiences, new people, new environments, going on trips, getting outside of our comfort zones, reading things that we normally wouldn't, trying new recipes, cooking new things, eating new food, becoming friends with new people, taking new subjects, trying new things, and establishing new habits, new exercises, right? Like I like going to the gym, and it gets stale when I'm working the same routine for months at a time. So I have to incorporate new exercises and learn new forms, new techniques. Maybe I'll shift up my repertoire or my pattern of reps from high reps to low reps, but increase the weight, or I'll lower the weight and then increase the reps. And maybe I'll switch out a couple of different exercises. If I'm working triceps, like recently I switched out the overhead skull crusher for the easy bar skull crusher. So going like this instead of like this. And I find that I'm getting a much deeper stretch here. And I'm actually feeling the delayed onset muscle soreness a day or two after in my triceps, which usually I haven't because I've maxed out the machines for doing tricep push downs. And so because I've gotten used to certain exercises, I have to incorporate new things to get a new stimulus and add a new stimulus to get new growth, right? And that's novelty on a micro scale. So if we can employ micro novelty or micro novel experiences, I believe that can lead to sustainable dopamine over a long period of time. That's not artificial. Now, yes, it is. We are seeking it from external experiences, but we're not putting anything inside ourselves. That's the difference. We're not consuming artificial stimulus. We're not consuming the artificial pornography. We're not consuming alcohol, substances, chemicals, whatever. We're tapping into the innate systems within ourselves that respond to the external environment. And I believe that's how we take back control, and that's how we can live a healthy, sustainable life and increase our enjoyment by naturally stimulating dopamine over a sustainable period of time. So that's what I do. That's how I maintain sobriety. That's how I'm maintaining sobriety a year into recovery. And that's how I believe I'm going to maintain sobriety long term. And I'm looking for ways to tweak this ability to tap into our natural reinforcement of behavior through stimulating dopamine release. And really what I'm explaining here is living life. This is what sober people do. Apparently, this is how I live sober, how people live sober, is by naturally releasing dopamine through a sustainable means, right? Through having loving relationships, going out on the weekends, taking a trip to a new location, doing new things, trying out something exciting, right? Going to a new restaurant, trying a new style of food that you haven't tried before. This is what I'm just figuring out a year into my recovery. I feel that I'm repairing, my neurons are repairing, I'm rewiring my brain, and I have dopamine that I can access now. I have a resource of dopamine that was fried from years of alcohol, stimulant, drug abuse. And I wasn't producing the dopamine because of the artificial stimulation that I was giving it through chemicals, through alcohol, through pornography. That just wrecked my natural system of dopamine. So now I'm repairing my brain and I can feel it and I'm starting to live life. That's what it is. Things are starting to get good for me. I'm starting to feel well. I'm starting to feel that I'm getting a grip on life, and I'm positively hopeful for the future. Now, if you like what I have to say and you're interested in recovery and addiction, check out this video for more.